Welcome to Whachacha's Tabletop World, the channel devoted to the love of board gaming. My name is Sweetness Whachacha, and these are my first impressions, spoiler-free, of Flashpoint Legacy of Flame. If you want to see an overview of the game, click on the link down below. Okay, so we're going to really just talk about Legacy of Flame. Now, Flashpoint exists as its own game with a number of expansions, and I played through all of it. I played through every map, every module, all of it. I've probably played like 30 different games of it, maybe more, I don't know, but I've explored everything there is to explore about the game. And really, I just want to kind of talk about this iteration of it. And it is kind of weird to do this first impressions kind of video, but I'm doing it for two reasons. Number one, there's a lot to talk about, but there's not a lot to talk about that isn't spoiler filled, right? That's not going to ruin the game for you. And so I can't really talk about this stuff anyway. And then secondly, as a practical thing, I want to enjoy this. I don't get any income or anything. This is just a hobby, this aspect of doing a channel on things. So, I do want to take my time and go through the campaign. I haven't finished it yet. So, it seems like there's enough information here to talk about and then also to be able to avoid spoilers. So that's a good way to do a first impressions video. Just on its own, let's talk about just Flashpoint briefly. If you haven't played Flashpoint, I think it's a fantastic cooperative game. It's got a great theme. The mechanisms work very, very well. I love the ideas of, putting out the small fires, pun intended, I guess, where you kind of go through and you have to kind of decide, like, am I going to clean up the fire and stuff, or am I going to go through towards the main goal of, rescuing people? So, like, every turn you have that kind of idea to go, to balance those two things, your long-term goal and your kind of short-term strategies. And then, of course, there's a real teamwork aspect to it. I love the fact that, you can, switch people out. That's such a fascinating thing. One of the most exciting and fun parts of any kind of game like this, any kind of cooperative game, is the fact that you have some replayability because you can be like, oh, this time I'm going to try this other kind of character. And I think it's so cool because that's where a lot of the fun comes in, leaning into whatever your special role is. I think it's so neat to add that extra layer. I've never seen this in any other game, any other cooperative game, I believe. I don't believe that I've ever seen it. The fact that you can just say, hey, look, this character, this role is working for me quite well, but now they're not as useful. And I really feel that in this particular, how the game is turned, whether that's a natural turn or whether that's a turn that was sort of unexpected, you're like, oh man, this is crazy. This is the character in the role to pick. So go back to the fire truck and kind of switch out. So I think that's really, really interesting. And, again, I think the theme is a very, very strong in it. And I think it's a very approachable one. So what do I want out of this game as opposed to, or what am I looking for? What was I looking for? Well, I think the biggest, there's a few little nitpicks or things that I wish would change with Flashpoint, but mainly I feel that now I'm going to talk a lot about Pandemic Legacy because, well, not a lot, but I'm going to reference it a lot, I guess, because there are so few legacy games, and I feel like that's a very, it's a great parallel and it's a good comparison, compare-contrast kind of thing. And I think of a game like Pandemic, and both cooperative, of course. There's so many roles, and exponentially, the combinations that you can make of the roles and things, it just creates a lot of variety. Of course, there are different maps and scenarios and different kinds of, looks at that system. But I feel like for Flashpoint, the thing that I was always, there are a number of new characters introduced in different expansions, but not enough for my taste, and also not enough to, some of the characters, I'm like, that's not a very interesting character or whatever. So my main thing is I wanted that. The other thing I was kind of looking for is maybe to have a bit of an updated look, and we'll talk about that, as well as, certain things cleaned up. For instance, when you set up the game, it's so weird. You have to go, I can set almost any game up that that I've played a couple of times just from memory, right? But with Flashpoint, I always have to look at it's just such a weird, you gotta flip the die over and then roll it, one of them again, and wait for a full moon, and it's just such a weird system. And I was really hoping that that part of it would be streamlined. And I do really like the idea of, the story being more enhanced. Of course, we see movies all the time, and I'm a big movie guy, and I love to watch films and stuff. And the idea of like, oh, there's got to be like an arsonist or something. There's like kind of like cliche of, these cliches of like, the firefighter that becomes an arsonist because they're trying to help the fire department, but then that's like an evil thing. And, I think in films, it's cliche is of course not great. We're like, okay, I've seen it. It's a cliche, but in gaming, we love it. You're like, it's like the exact opposite. You're like, oh, you're in a Western and you're like, cool. I'm gonna like hold the reins in my teeth and shoot my guns. You want to do all the things that you've seen in the movies because you want to like live through those and kind of have that experience. And so that's really exciting to me. Now, how does that kind of pan out? Well, let's talk about the art and components first. I usually do that in general. Now, I was really hoping that they would do an update of the pieces and stuff, but they are like exactly the same. And not to say that this game has ever had bad components. They've always just been like passable. The board is very clean and neat, so you can see where to go and stuff. And that's great. I like to have, things to be readable and playable. I mean, that's the purpose of the whole thing. But, excuse me, most of the, like the fire tokens. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this token, right? It's functional. You flip the smoke over to become fire. It's got a little red ring and fire in it. What more do you want, right? This is functional. Like this is a broken wall. Like the art on the stuff is like, you can see where you're going. These are pictures or whatever. But like, these could have been, something a little more interesting. The art could have been updated in some way. The POI things, it's the same exact pieces. And not only, is it something that like, is just not super exciting. Like I feel like for this kind of an edition, this is a big deal. Make it a legacy game. I mean, there's like 15 legacy games out there. This is, and they haven't, this game hasn't really had any new content in like, I don't know, 10 years. I mean, it's been a while. So it seemed like maybe they would have, really, done a better job of like, or, just had some new components. And not only is that like, I have all these components, so now this game is resettable and we'll talk about that a little bit, but what do I now have like 45 of these things. It doesn't really matter. They're not exciting to me. It would have been really nice, I think, to have a nicer version. Now, this isn't a pricey game. I saw it at my game shop. I was pretty excited. Actually, I had no idea it was going to be out this soon. I've been kind of keeping tabs, and I hadn't seen anything, and boom, here it is. I walk into my game shop, and there it is, which is really great, but it's $90. I think it was $90 on the shelf, so I think that's usually pretty close to MSRP. It's an expensive game, so, updating the components might have been an extra fee on there as well. I get all that, but yeah, I guess that was one of the things that I was kind of like looking forward to. Again, pretty passable. Now, the maps, I do, they have, one of the strengths of the expansions and stuff is that all kinds of crazy maps. You get like skyscrapers, and you've got like, mechanics with cars and things, and all sorts of submarine. There's a submarine map, all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's kind of cool that they have that ability to do that here. But, this is, I'm not going to spoil these for you. Let's see. Okay, so here we have like the training thing. But if you look, they don't line up wonderfully here. Like you can see, here's part of the other map. You can very clearly see that. And then, it's just like, they're not quite lined up nicely, which is not a big deal. Look, here's the other map here as well. You can see that kind of coming through, and the spiral bound, it's nice that they have the two sides so you can combine them and stuff and make different things. But I guess in general, and it's got to fit in the box, so I get that. But this is not my favorite. When you're playing the game, I don't think I'm thinking about like, well, I can see the map through the other map on the other side here. I'm thinking about the game itself. So, but I think that was kind of a miss to not have maybe updated some of these components, especially since like they were just mainly serviceable, I think, rather than that. Okay, so let's leave that behind because I really do, I do love this system. Now, what's the other thing I was looking for was, maybe to clean up some of this stuff. It's still a little, I still got to look at the thing. It's not quite as bad as it was because you don't have to add these flare tokens. Now, the original game had these flare things, and I feel like that was one thing they did streamline. I don't know if it's going to come back in the campaign, but, you put these little flare things down, and then when you rolled that, if you landed on that flare, you would roll again and add a new flare. And that was kind of a bit, and that was like kind of the clock of the game. So they did have an expansion, and I can't remember what it was called off the top of my head now. I should have looked this up, but that had like an event deck, and that's essentially what they have now. And not only do they have like this fire deck that they can change per mission, but they also have other fire decks in the box, right? So like they can take cards out of each of those and make their own mix. And I think that's really, really cool. Now, not only do they have this fire deck, which, you know, a lot of times will just be like, you know, advance the fire. You know, I'm just trying to make sure I don't have anything. But sometimes, you know, it'll give you some AP, advance the fire, and then you'll draw an event card from the event deck. And that's really much more exciting to me. I think I removed everything that was could have been a spoiler, so I've got them away. But you know, these event cards, there's really a small event deck, and it's not shuffled. It's made, you're not supposed to shuffle it at all, so you go through in order, which is much more deterministic, which I really love. And that deck really ties into the thing that I really like, is the idea of this story, which is the other thing I was really looking for. And the event deck really provides much more of like this concise experience that's telling you this story. They also have the, you know, this paragraph book, which allows you to go in and read different stories and things. And there's special POIs, which is something from another expansion. So I really like that because, you know, it's in order, and, you know, it is a bit, I say it's deterministic because you're going through it in order, but the events can be pretty swingy, right? It can be a bit of luck, like something you really needed at the time, or it could be something that fizzles because you did it, you can't use it at the time. It's like, put this out, and you're like, okay, well, I can't, there's nothing there, you know, so it's a bit like that. But then also sometimes it's something bad that if it's in a bad situation, it can really swing. So it can just allow for much greater swings, which is kind of a bummer. But I think, you know, I'm much more of a nuts and bolts, like, hey, I want to optimize every turn. I want to, like, the system's got to be really good. But if a story is really, like, I feel like in this case, I'm willing to give that up because it adds such a flavor to each of the episodes. And I should have mentioned that I like the fact that it's broken up into these episodes, and each of the episodes, like, the map is going to match, right? So the map is like, this is where you are right now. The event deck is like, this is what's kind of happening. The paragraph book is adding this story to it. And so they're taking a great system and just sort of, you know, adding this story over top of it, which I feel like is very, very satisfying. Now, this other expansion was one of the most popular ones because it added this, you know, event deck rather than, you know, having other, like, it just made the story more interesting, but also gave you some interesting things, choices and things. And, you know, there are some choices sometimes where you're like, what do I want to do here? I can read one paragraph or another. And that's a bit of an interesting thing because you see that in other, you know, other kind of games and things, like, you know, having that choice like Above and Below and Sleeping Gods and all this, where like there are these choices, and there's not a huge amount of that, but it is there, and it's very, very interesting to me. So I love that. I think the story so far is really well done. You know, so that's a huge thing. Now, the other part of this is, like, we're going to do a little bit of comparisons here now. 12 episodes, not a lot. Now, they do have these 2 prologue episodes, and that, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that, but I don't really like that because I do agree. Sure, it's great to get people's feet wet and to understand the game before they go into the legacy part where you can't go back from. Totally get that. But if you are familiar with Flashpoint, I would skip that entirely. And I did because I want to get right to the legacy part. I want to get to the game. And it's sort of, there's 2 prologues, and they both remove some rules, okay, so that you don't get like the rolls and things, you know, that you would normally get, you know, and that's one of the things that makes the game more interesting to me. So I skipped over them, and they do tell you, like, you don't have to play them. So that's great. But I did read the rule book for the prologue, and I was like, oh, this is different. Oh, this is different. And this is different. And then I go and I'm like, oh, that's because they're not really the rules of Flashpoint. That's just for the prologue. So it was a little bit confusing. So I wish I hadn't even read that prologue or whatever. That's fine. Not that big of a deal. Okay, so the story is really great. Now, the 12 episodes, I think for me personally, one of the things that people talk about in legacy games that they like or don't like, is that they're like, well, you can only play this game like 25 times and then that's it. You know, even though most of these people are never going to play more than a few times any given game anyway. But to me, I love it. I love just, give me that story. I'll play through the whole thing. Amazing. And, you know, if I really loved it and I spent 20 hours on the thing, I'll go buy another copy and play it again. And I've done that with legacy games before because it's so much enjoyment and so much fun. It's just a fun, like, I love it. And I love also just completing something, like, cool, that was a great experience. Going away, I'm done with that. I'm going to go have a new experience. But this actually, I feel like is not as much content. You've only got 12 episodes, okay, minus the, you know, the sort of the training episodes. And, you know, that's not as much as, say, something like Pandemic Legacy, where you play, and in that system, you play each month twice. You play January. If you win, you move on to February. If you lose, you play January again, and then no matter what, you move on to February. So you could play 12 to 24 games. Most people probably play about 16, 18 games or whatever, fine. This one is just 12, so it's a lot less. It's just significantly less because you're always going to move to the next episode. But they have struck a nice little balance because you can like reset and play. Again, this can be your copy of Flashpoint, which I think is really kind of an awesome thing, because if you never played Flashpoint before, now you've got Flashpoint, right? You can just play this. And I would imagine you're going to see, and I have seen some of the things that you've seen in other, expansions and things, which is good and bad, because it's good because, hey, cool, I like it. And it's fun because it's part of Flashpoint, but also, I want a lot of new stuff in this. I want to see a lot of new things. So that's I think they've struck a nice balance with that. So like, this is a continually playable game. You can play with all sorts of different stuff and keep it fresh and interesting even after playing the campaign. And then you also get to enjoy the campaign. So that's there. Okay, so now one of my other things I wanted was different kinds of roles. Now, you only get a set amount of people in here, but it's pretty cool because you get different stickers that you can sticker the characters. You can name them like in any of these kind of things. And then the specialist abilities are quite a little bit different, and honestly, none of them are really that great. Like you have the healer and the medic in the one, and I feel like they're much more efficient than the medic here. So, some of the characters have some kind of nice abilities, but nothing too groundbreaking. I believe these are all you're going to get because you're meant to archive the. This is again just normal setup stuff. I'm not giving it away. This is like episode 1. You're supposed to archive the rest of the stickers. So I'd assume you're not going to get any more, but I do really like the fact that, there are sticker slots here, and that means you can kind of refine each of your characters. So you're kind of maybe less of like, hey, here's a ton of different kind of playable characters, but maybe like, here's characters that you can like really develop more interestingly. So honestly, like that's kind of cool, I think, because, some of these other systems, sure, you're like, okay, well, this character could do this character could do this, great. But now you have the chance to really have a hand and use some strategy in creating that particular character with strengths and weaknesses that you like. And I haven't seen that in other games. And frankly, I really like playing stuff I haven't played before, right? I like to have those opportunities to see different design ideas and things like that. So I'm very eager to see how this plays out a little more. Again, I have limited experience with that. Another thing I kind of like about this that's different than the other version is that you can sort of press your luck. The concept of like, if you win the game, you can keep playing, but if you lose, then you've just lost. But you can like keep playing to try to get more people and win better accommodations or whatever. And that's really kind of neat. Or maybe clean up things better, or fix, there's a character that can fix the walls and things. And so you're looking for these accommodations. And so you can, not say you have to play for like another hour, but you can, you can say, hey, let's just take another turn or two and just clean up some of this, or save a couple extra people. I think that's really kind of fascinating. Just the idea of like, well, we've won. Do you want to keep going a little bit, or that you're rolling the dice though, because, something can happen and boom, and a couple explosions later and now you're losing a game you would have won before. So I really do like that. Something else they did was, I believe they changed the rules on switching out roles, which as I mentioned was one of my really favorite parts of this whole thing. I mean, I really love planning, like, sitting down and saying, hey, look, we're going to take these 4 characters because that's a good balance, or like, look, I'm going to take that. In the other game, it had the hazmat specialist, which isn't in this one, but for instance, like you'd be like, I'll go in with the hazmat specialist. We're going to destroy the hazmat that's in there, and then I'll come back out and we'll do a swap. Or you're like, look, we're going to bring these people to save people, and we're going to bring these people to put out the fire, right? And there's like a discussion, and then you'll say, okay, well, later we'll swap them out or whatever. And I like that a lot. And so I think they maybe incentivize that a little more by allowing you to, it's only 2 action points to switch your role at the truck. You still have to start your turn doing it. You lose any saved action points and you lose any equipment. I'm not going to really talk too much about the equipment because that is a card in there, and it is in the rules, opening rules, but you don't get any in the initial episode, the first episode, so I don't really want to discuss that too much, but I like that aspect of it as well. So, but you'll lose that as well. You won't be able to take that with you. And, and not to say too much, but, there's this fire truck too, like a card for the fire truck. And, that's kind of exciting, the idea that, well, what about the upgrades here? And I think that's kind of a cool thing. Now, one thing that I think, again, drawing a little bit of a comparison to Pandemic Legacy, one of the things about like Risk Legacy and Pandemic Legacy and Charterstone, like these games that have this, that are legacy games, again, very few of them around. One of the coolest part of that game is to like write on the board, just make new lines, name things on the board, add new areas, build little bases and things, and put stickers on the board, and really alter your board. Cities crumble or have problems, or like fall into disrepair, or get blasted off there, or whatever. There's just all this crazy stuff that can happen, and that's kind of a little bit of a loss here, because I feel like these maps, it's cool to have the map books, right? Like, I mean, it's neat that there's a variety of maps, so you're gaining that over like having one standard map, but there's no altering those maps, right? Like that's your maps. And again, maybe I will at some point, but I feel like that's kind of a bit something that you don't get, that you get in the other legacy games. I do really like what's in here. I don't feel like it's as impactful as, say, as some of the other legacy games that I've just listed, right? I feel like those, and again, there are envelopes and things to open. I don't think at this point, again, I've only played a chunk of it, but this is not the kind of thing where I feel like there is as much crazy things happening where you're like, oh my God, that's all coming out. I don't feel like the legacy aspect of it is as strong in terms of like ripping up cards and writing on the boards and changing the physical thing, which is really what a legacy game, that's what your goal is. But to me, and this is like the strength of this whole thing, period, of coming from, making a game of Flashpoint, is really like the Pandemic thing, is that like Pandemic is one of my all-time top 3 games, right? Like of all time. And that's a great system. So when you take a game that's a great system that you're familiar with, and you hang the legacy game onto it, that's incredible, because then you've enjoyed playing that game, you understand it, and now you can explore this whole new way of enjoying that game. And I feel like that's what Flashpoint has to offer here. So to me, like, while it doesn't feel like maybe as drastic as in the board aspect of it and things like that, it's just like I love to play Flashpoint. I think it's super fun, and just little things like how they deal with injured firefighters and things. And I won't talk about too much stuff. Like, there's just some neat little choices, and they're not like so like blastingly amazing, but like there's some really kind of like, I think that story and that event deck and the paragraph thing, it's like just these little, like, you're like, oh, I love playing this game, and then it's like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's a little extra. It's like this really great way to enjoy the game, and it just adds so much to it, I think. And because it's such a great system, to me, that's very, very enjoyable to go through. So I think in general, let's just do a quick sum up here. In general, the production is, as Flashpoint has always been, like a serviceable. Like, I feel like the artwork and the components and stuff, they're fine. They get the job done, but they've never really wowed me, and I wish that they had kind of updated that. I feel like the legacy aspects aren't as like strong in terms of marking up the board and like constantly ripping up cards and making these, like, because I can put my boards from Pandemic and the other stuff, I can frame those and put them on the wall if I wanted to, because that's a whole story there, but it keeps what makes Flashpoint super fun, because it's a fantastic game, and the additions are just really, really wonderful. Like event deck. Sorry, my cat just went a little crazy. So I feel like it's super, super fun in the event deck, and that story, the paragraphs and stuff. It really reminds me of like Eldritch Horror. I know this, I'm supposed to be wrapping up here, but it really reminds me of like Eldritch Horror versus like Arkham Horror. Arkham Horror had this tons of story and crazy things that could happen, and Eldritch Horror was like, okay, let's make a more concise narrative. And I think that's what this offers, right? Like, you're going through these little stories. It feels super thematic. It's a great theme to have that. And all the little additions, I think, are totally enjoyable. If you own Flashpoint, of course, this is going to be a fantastic and fun way to experience this game, with the extra story and the events and the ability to alter things and change things and specialize things how you like. But then also, don't have Flashpoint and you've never had it before. Get this. You'll get probably most of what you've got out of the other expansions. You'll enjoy the legacy aspect of it, and then you'll have a game that you can continue to play for years and years and years, because you can reset it. So I think it did a great job of having that kind of balance there. So all in all, This is a huge win for me. I've been very excited about this. I just missed the Kickstarter, unfortunately, so I was really couldn't wait for the retail version. So I'm very excited about that. But I'm again not quite through it. I'm just really kind of scratched the surface. But yeah, this is a big win for me. I'm very excited to continue through it, and I will be coming out with a sort of a follow-up video. Maybe I don't know whether that'll be spoiler filled or I'll just have my general thoughts. Maybe I'll do two, who knows. But if you would like to, do have an overview, as I mentioned at the top, in the link below, if you want to kind of see a little more of like how the game plays, if you've never played Flashpoint before, if you want to just take a little bit of a better look at the components and things that come with it. So yeah, but thanks for joining me. For now, I gotta roll.